So we're going through a time right now that the world is coming to a shift. Things are changing, and I feel that people are losing their purpose. They don't know what direction to take their life in, um, and where to put their energy towards, right? And so what does this do to us? It allows us to change our minds, to become hopeless, I feel, in certain areas. So what's changed, right, throughout my life that has brought me to where I am right now? So this is my testimony of how I was brought to Jesus throughout my life multiple times, where I'm at now, and the journey that I'm taking, where I found my purpose, and how exactly I got there, and in hopes that it reaches someone out there that is also seeking, is currently lost. Maybe they have a friend or family member that's lost and they don't know what direction to go. So my name is Fernando, and this is my story. Right now I'm 37 years old. When I was younger, I lived in Tampa, Florida. Most of my life, my parents migrated from Mexico. My mother was born in Texas, and my father was born in Mexico, and moved over to Florida, to, like everyone else, to seek a better life. And well, what happened, right? Hispanic family moves over to Florida. Parents are working in the fields, in the agricultural fields, and life is going on. Fast forward to when I'm about 13 years old. We were a family of 6. My parents, my 2 sisters, and a brother, and then myself being the oldest. Well, what starts to happen throughout our lives, I feel like none of us go through life without some kind of trial, some things that we have to get over, either whether it's within our childhood, whether it's within our faith, our friends or family. There's always something that we have to overcome. And so during this time, this is kind of where my trial started as a child. My father was an abusive alcoholic for many years, until he left, the house for good. But during that time, what were we going through? As a child, you start to develop this sense of loneliness, this sense of no love. Me being the oldest, I had to become the new father figure, for the household, for my brothers and sisters. And so as I got older, moving into my teenage years, I feel like that's where you start to rebel. During this time, my mother actually would bring us in and out of church, various kinds of churches. And so I knew about God, always heard about him, never really understood fully what it was to be a Christian or a follower, or what God really meant in my life. But at very minimum, I was presented to him, learned something about him, and that helped me throughout my life. Somewhat, until now, until it took 37 years for me to kind of really understand what everything was all about. So, dealing with my abusive alcoholic father, he would hit my mother. A lot of times, there'd be physical abuse on myself. I would take it for my brothers and sisters so they wouldn't have to. And so during this time, what happens when someone's in abuse, or in a family of that sort, where they feel like there's no love? As you get older, you start to fill these voids with other things, whether it's drugs, alcohol, relationships, food, spending. There's things that we do later on in life to fill in these pockets that have been left in us as children. So this is where I started going down the track. In high school, I started drinking at a very early age. Around 15, 16 years old, I was drinking, doing a lot of partying. And during this time, I was also seeking a lot of different kind of relationships, to fill that void of what love and happiness was for me in my life. So this carried on from probably the age of 15 until about a solid, the drinking, probably until a solid 26, 27 years old, when I really calmed down. But during these years, what would happen? Well, different trials, Alcoholism got to me, and it started off as drinking for fun, right? But then later on it was drinking to forget, drinking to fill voids, drinking to not think. And it was a form of addiction, right? So my personality has that where if I find something that I enjoy, that I like, there's an addiction that develops, something that happens. And so throughout my life, there were times where I would get blacked out drunk. The next day I wouldn't remember what happened, and there was consequences to face the following day, right? Because nothing good happens when you're drunk and have to face the music the following day. But during those times when I had the loneliness, right, where I would wake up and I would be by myself and I would have to face, the mistakes that I just did, I knew that it wasn't something that was me, right? Something that I wanted to do forever, something that it brought me, momentary happiness during that time. But the next day you feel that shame, you feel like something more, like this isn't what I want my life to be. And so I would go back to God, temporarily. Whether I would visit church once or twice, pray a little bit, that's what I would do. But even then it wasn't fulfilling, right? It would just be a temporary band-aid until the next event, until the next episode happened. So fast forward a little bit, I stopped drinking some, but then what happens now is, as human beings, there's only so many things that we need, right? Things that we want, whether it's respect, money, love, affection, security, right? There's only so many things that a human needs. We're just on different levels, each one of us. So what happens from there? The alcoholism calms down a little bit. I start drinking less, but I still have voids, right? I still have pockets in my heart, in my mind, that haven't been filled, right? And they definitely weren't filled through alcohol. And so now, what do I start to think? I was like, oh, now maybe it wasn't alcohol that made me happy. I need financial success, right? So I need money. And so this turned from alcoholism to, now I went and started gambling. And this started probably from the age of 18. It would be to the point to where every 2 weeks where I would have my paycheck, I would get paid, cash it, go to the casino that night, and it would get spent in a couple hours. Sometimes I get lucky and I would, have my money for the whole weekend. But most of the time it didn't end like that. And these kind of things happened for years, to the point to where it got pretty bad. Ended up selling a lot of my stuff, pawning it or selling it outright for cash, just so I can go back out there and gamble again, right? Because you're chasing. So if you're losing the money, it's guaranteed you're never gonna win. Over time, you might win 1 day or 2 days here and there, and then that's what kind of starts that addiction process, right? That happiness. But it's all a lie, right? You win a couple $100 or even $1,000. There was times where I was really up, but it's all temporary, right? It doesn't last forever. You're gonna lose all your money like I did. And bam, another trial, another pitfall down for me. And again, when I would be down to nothing, I would come back and seek God, but I didn't know exactly what it was I was seeking, and I didn't really ask for change. It was more just me feeling bad for myself, feeling pity and anger, at what I had done, anger at myself, and worthless, right? Because you feel like after you've done the same mistake over and over and over, that there is no coming back from that people don't owe you anything. They don't owe you forgiveness. They don't owe you respect, right? And so you just feel down on yourself, and that kind of compounds. So that happened from the ages of 15 up until about my early 30s, those kind of things. And the last and most recent trial that I've gone through now is just in relationships, right? The abandonment of my father, me leaving my house, with my mother and my siblings at a very early age. This is where I wanted to seek love and companionship in someone else, but then I also put all my responsibilities onto the other person, which wasn't fair. And it wasn't God-centered. And so what does that do? Every day that we live this life where we're in a relationship that we don't put God first, we put the enemy first, right? We put this world first. That's why right now you see a lot of individualism, a lot of secularism, you know, where everyone is seeking first for themselves, and then they're going to give. So they seek first for themselves, and then they give. And in a relationship, in a marriage, any kind of relationship that's formed that way, with thinking of yourself first and then thinking about the other, at some point or another, it's doomed to fail, I believe. You know, in relationships now, seeking God, right? It's kind of the other way around. It's, you know, God first. You put the other person ahead of you. You take care of them, and vice versa, right? If they're also followers of Jesus, they put you first, right? And so that was the biggest conversion. That was the biggest change for me in my life, to where everything was for the inside. Everything, you know, the alcohol was for the inside. The gambling was for the money, for me to have financial freedom, right? For me to feel safe with the money, right? These relationships were to fulfill my needs, and it's very backwards. It's very opposite. And so fast forward to today, you know, I'm coming out of trials right now. And so my biggest thing, I believe, that drove me to today, you know, to this point, was I was always seeking purpose, right? What was my reason for being on this earth? What was I meant to do here? You know, who am I meant to talk to? What am I meant to say? What am I meant to do with my life? You know, if I'm on this earth, luckily 60 to 100 years, what am I supposed to do with this soul? And it was always a constant battle. So if you noticed yourself, right, falling out of a crowd that you used to talk to all the time, or a group that you were really connected with, and now you feel distant, or you're going through trials and you know you need something different because everything that you've been doing just isn't working. This is where I've fallen so many times over and over. And for some reason, I hear a voice of Jesus, right? A voice of God is saying, you know, I'm the way. I'm the way. And everything that you're doing, you're never going to find any peace in it. And so this time I was like, okay, let me try again. So in 2024, I started going to church again. And then I'd never been baptized out of fear, right? Because I knew I didn't want to lie to God. I didn't want to lie to myself and know that I was going to go back to my old ways. And I didn't necessarily know what the process was, right? What is it to become a Christian? And if I get baptized, or if I go to church, am I one and done, right? It's a very individual path for everybody, because everyone is in a different level on their connection with God, different journeys, different lives, different purposes, different gifts that He gives you specifically for your life. So there is no answer for everybody. That's why everyone has to have their own walk with God. And so this time around, you know, I started reading the Bible more, and that's what made the biggest change, the biggest adjustment for me. So I did want to read, you know, this is my testimony. My biggest thing that I was looking for was purpose. And I finally found some answers, right? All the answers you'll ever need are in the Bible. You just got to know where to look. And so I was starting to read the book of Ecclesiastes, which is, this book it's for trying to figure out the purpose of life. And so what do we do while we're going through life? We're trying to find meaning in everything that we do. And we're taught this, right? Let's say you take God out of the picture, and it's just a family that's a good family. You know, mom, dad, one kid, you know, one boy, one girl, you know, everyone's responsible, everything's fine. And you're going through school, your parents tell you go to college, you get you a career, and then you start working, but then you still have no fulfillment in that. You thought that a topic that you really enjoyed was your passion, was your purpose, only to find out, you know, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later that you have no fulfillment in it. And you're wondering why that is, and you have your midlife crisis, or you have your crisis right out of college when you have your first job, and it's like, oh man, this isn't what I wanted to do. And so for me, I went to college, but at a later point. For me, it was more about trying different jobs, different careers, hands-on kind of approach, was how most of my life was. And I was one that was really business minded, business oriented. So I always wanted to start a business or management or something. That's the road that I took. And it was always money driven. My purpose was also money driven. And as you get older, as you get deeper in your faith, as you come to God and you learn more, I believe the wiser you get, the more you learn, the more real the world kind of gets unveiled, the sadder you get. Why? Because you start to notice that the things on this earth are futile. They're temporary. They're not forever. You know, if you notice, everything that we do every single year is on a cycle, you know, and everyone feels that they're going to reach the end. They're going to reach the goal, only to find out that everything that they've done on this earth throughout their whole life, sure, it had meaning while you were alive, right? Because you're going through it. But in the overall sense of everything, it's meaningless. And why? Well, because we're not living on this earth forever. We're not eternal here in our carnal, in our flesh. You know, we're here for a few years and then our soul, our spirit goes. And so everything that we seek, everything that we chase is for nothing. And I say it in the most blunt way, but I'm not saying that, you don't live your life on this earth unhappily. You know, Jesus definitely wants you to live on this earth happily, but with the right reasons, with the right purpose. So in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, starting at verse 2, I just wanted to read this for you guys and then kind of explain it a little bit. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher, completely meaningless. What do people get for all their hard work under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth never changes. The sun rises, the sun sets, then hurries around and rises again. The wind blows south and turns north. Around it goes, blowing in circles. Rivers run into the sea, but the sea is never full. Then the water returns again to the rivers and flows out to the sea again. Everything is worrisome beyond description. No matter how much we see, we are never satisfied. No matter how much we hear, we are not content. History merely repeats itself. It has all been done before. Nothing under the sun is truly new. Sometimes people say, here is something new, but actually it is old. Nothing is ever truly new. We don't remember what happened in the past, and in the future generations, no one will remember what we are doing now. So for me, this was a big, through my changes, my transformation, reading Ecclesiastes and starting to going through that, it really started to shift on how I thought about my life and my connection with God and my connection with this world. And it started to make sense, if you think about it. If you're a new believer, if you don't know, what you believe in right now and you're confused, just like I was in the past, just bring it down to the basics, right? Like, what are we on this earth to do? And so a lot of people will give you, their purpose. You're supposed to find your purpose. And well, how does one do that without some kind of guidance or direction? Because you're literally guessing. But it wasn't until I got closer to God and started reading the Bible, I was like, oh, the answers are literally right here, right? If you ponder that, it's kind of like a weight lifted off your shoulders, thinking that the earth is meaningless. Because great, that gives you the freedom, like, of all that pressure that we received from society, that we have to go to college, we have to have these careers, we have to work the 40 years, we have to retire, and that's a happy life. Well, that was made by man, right? That was explanation made by people with companies over time of what a happy life should be, because it fit their narrative. But now reading this, we're here temporarily, right? And God is what's eternal. And then I started asking myself, okay, fine. So we serve God. And I was like, but why is it that I always want, inside myself, right? Why is it that I always want to do something more? Like, I can never be fully content or happy with what I have, with what I'm doing. And so it's a shift in your mindset of your needs and your wants. A shift in your mindset of what's important to you in your life now. And so coming back to God, and then looking at all my trials of alcohol, of gambling, of relationships, money, all these things, these were all of the world, things that we're chasing here. And I'm not chasing them anymore, right? Now, there's still pursuits, right, of financial success and stuff like that, but it's not the core. It's not the front and center of what my life is anymore. And so that's giving me more room mentally to not seek happiness, but seeking now to help. I seek now to help others, and I'll talk more about that in a second. If you notice, just take a day. If you're on social media, if you're on your phone, and let's say you don't notice that you're on your phone all day, but at the end of the night, you just feel worn out, you feel secluded, you feel alone, you feel like you have no meaning, but the only happiness that you have is being on your phone. Well, that's the trick, isn't it? Right? That's where we stay trapped, because that's the easy part. I feel like now, in this year 2025, it's going to be even harder to find our happiness. It's going to be even harder to find our meaning and our fulfillment, because the world is only going more individual, where it has to be the opposite. It has to be more of groups, more of families, more of friends, but centered around the topic of Jesus. And why? Well, I'll explain that here, because it is quite important. And so when we have a void, and like, let's say right now you're thinking about Christianity and you're wondering why there's such a yearning for purpose, why there's such a need for having to fulfill something with your life on this earth. Well, again, reading the Bible, it's not a coincidence. We were instilled with this desire by Jesus. And so he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 11, it says, "Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planned eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end." Right? And so this part is what's important, is he has planted eternity in the human heart. So in our soul, there's always something that's seeking, right, the more advanced, right? Why do we always go celestial and seek other planets and what's out there in the earth? Well, that's God putting the want and the desire to seek him, right? He is the eternity. He is the forever. And then he is the answer. He's the thing that we'll always reach for, but we'll never get. And so this is the purpose, right, of what we are meant to, why we were put on this earth to do. And this is my interpretation of the trials that I've gone through, and my testimony, right, of what I've found. But now, does that necessarily mean that we're always, that he doesn't want us to have a happy life on this earth? No. He also put us here so that we may enjoy our lives, by his ways. And if you've ever had any negative connotation towards the Bible of strict rules or whatnot, if you pay attention and if you start to actually read and do the things the Bible tells you to do and God, tells you to do, it's not a bad life, right? What is he telling you to do? He's telling you to not lie, not cheat, don't steal, be faithful to your partner, no bad things, right? We fight it sometimes, and I come across people fighting it because the things that he does want us to change are the things that we're doing to harm ourselves. For a long time I didn't come to Christianity because I didn't want to quit drinking. I didn't want to quit gambling. I wanted to be in the relationships that I wanted to be in. I knew that I was a liar and that I stole and these things, right? So in our flesh wants to keep that. That's what's making us happy. And that's what makes us sinful. And that's what gets us in trouble, right? Had I not done the things that I'd done in my past, I wouldn't have the troubles that I have right now. And so, here's the next passage after that. So it's still the same thing, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, but this one's verse 12. It says, "So I conclude, there is nothing better than to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can. And people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are gifts from God." Right? So he's given us gifts. There's things around this earth that are only from him, that are all from him, right? And that were meant for our use, for our purpose, but just in the right ways. So I think that's where we get lost. And so then you ask yourself, okay, fine, I'll go to Jesus and I'll rethink about what purpose is on life, or what meaning is. But then now, what do I do with the rest of my time? What do I do with my life? And we notice them as skills or talents as humans here on earth, of what we do with our lives, right? If you're a good leader, a good manager, if you're talented in sports, if you're a good speaker, if you're very helpful or giving, we contribute these characteristics into our professional lives, right? But these were actually God-given gifts so that we may serve his kingdom. And that's where the difference is. The purpose that you feel that you have for your life isn't necessarily for your life itself, right? It's not for you to use for you. The gifts that God has given you, these characteristics, these traits, these abilities, it's so that you may use them for the glory of God, right? For the kingdom of God. And so here in 1 Corinthians verse 4, it says, "There are different kinds of spiritual gifts, but the same Spirit is the source of them all. There are different kinds of service, but we serve the same Lord. God works in different ways, but it is the same God who does the work in all of us. A spiritual gift is given to each of us so we can help each other." So we can help each other, right? That was probably the biggest shift in my testimony of where my actual happiness started to come in. I noticed that on days that I don't talk to anybody, that I'm on my phone, that I'm on screens all day, or that I'm closed in a room in an office somewhere, is probably like my most unhappiest days. And so reading these chapters, reading these books in the Bible, and then going through what I've gone through, and then trying to find and seek God to finally get me out of this cycle, right? This repetition of being okay, doing bad things, being in a bad position, then being okay, doing bad things, and being in a bad position, right? I wanted to stop that. But at the same time, I didn't want to just stop and do nothing. I wanted to stop and do something with the abilities that I had. And so reading through this, I've always wanted to be a public speaker, right? I enjoy teaching people. I enjoy helping people with their problems, but all of it was always geared in the business sector. And no matter how many people I would help, sure, they would start their businesses. Some of them wouldn't. Some of them would succeed. Some would fail. And great, right? Great for those that have succeeded and were able to feed their families and hire employees and all that. But there was still always like that lack. Like no matter how many people I helped, there's like I don't know, I didn't feel like I was doing enough. And now kind of changing courses, it's different. So now I'm using what I feel is my spiritual gift given from God to present you guys with something like this, for example, right? This is the shift that you make from your earthly life to your godly life. Why did it take me so long? Well, again, I was stubborn. God gives us many opportunities throughout our lives to come to him, whether it's through other people, through churches, through circumstances or trials. He's always there for you, right? And he's always reaching out. He's never going to reach out all the way. You have to, come those last 2 inches and seek him, right? And so that's what I've done now. And it takes time. It takes effort. The reason that I failed, I guess, with being a follower in the past was because after I felt that I came to Jesus, I didn't realize that there was more work to be done. It's just the beginning phase. So if you're in a phase where you're in the very beginnings and you don't know what to do with your life, or you've started but you feel lost still, or you feel like you're not doing enough, just know that it does take time. You know, how old are you? Right? How old are you? How long did it take you to develop these habits, these bad habits, these things that you're doing all the time? Years and years, right? So you can't expect that these strongholds are broken in a day, to a certain extent, because God is great and nothing is impossible for him. So things can change from one day to another, right? But it's all on God's timing. Sometimes it takes a couple days, sometimes it takes months, sometimes it takes years. Sometimes your prayers are never answered, but that's not because out of punishment or something like that, because maybe God had a different plan for you. So if you're watching this video and you're wondering why I came across and why you're watching this, those verses that I read in the Bible, you were meant to hear them, right? Everything that happens in this earth is divine. It's not by accident. It's not by coincidence. I truly believe now that me even just sitting here making this video was meant to happen on purpose, so that you on the other side can watch it and realize what's going on. And maybe it changes your life and maybe it doesn't. Maybe you reject God and go a different way. But you heard the message and it's going to be in your mind and you're going to want to come back to him. I spent 37 years of my life trying to stay away from him, trying to solve my own life in my own ways, and I had some success at it. But ultimately, it's not the answer. And so now, coming through the love of Christ, you know, praying and asking for forgiveness, and then really feeling like all of my past, all of my troubles that I've gone through and have put other people through have been forgiven. But that doesn't mean that's where the work ends. It's literally just the beginning. But that's okay, because now you have a different mindset of how to tackle this earth, how to, you know, get along with your neighbors, how to do better in your life. And the answers are there, right? So on the days where you don't know what the answers are, if there's a little advice I can give you and you don't know where to start, just talk to God. You know, go to your bed, go to your couch, kneel down and just have a conversation with him. Message me, I'll help you. But you know, it's been a long time since I wanted to make this video, and it's the first one. This is going to be the first one of the channel. My goal is to kind of shift my mentality from being just business-minded, but being business-minded and helping those business owners, but with God-centered, right? And so we'll see where this leads. We'll be doing other testimonials. I don't know. I just decided to make this video today. Why? Because I was called to. And I'll allow God to take it from here. But yeah, if you guys are going through something tough today, you got to get out of your own head. You got to get off your phone and you got to go talk to somebody else. Why? Well, because when we're inside of our mind, you know, it's the enemy that's talking to us. It's the enemy that's putting bad thoughts on repeat over and over and over and over, and which that leads to even more, you know, loneliness and seclusion and more despair. And so if you want your life to change, you have to change your life. So I think that's a good one for today. I look forward to interacting with the rest of the world through Christianity and through my experiences. And the more you guys communicate back with me, the more I feel I'll be able to contribute back to you. So if you're having a bad day, go help someone else out. It'll make you feel great. I love you guys. Jesus loves you. If you're lost, seek Jesus.